today is our 10th episode.
Ooh.
Episode number 10. It's actually our 13th episode if you count the 3 pre-launch specials, but it's episode number 10, which is why I'm back this week, because we can't have Jake stealing our first big milestone.
First big milestone, double digits, kind of.
Double digits, yeah.
Is today really episode 10?
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, do you want to do the intro? Should we get started? Jake, did you watch the video that Andrew sent?
I watched the video, yes.
Okay.
I did.
Oh,
Okay.
It seemed important to do beforehand.
Yeah.
The first 30 minutes will actually just be silence as we sit and watch the video, as Jake watches the video.
We could do like a reactionary.
Yeah, we'll like make erudite noises like and stuff like that.
Indeed. Very salient.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, and welcome to Hypothetically Intentional, where we ask the question, what if we set intentions with everything we did? Still got it. I'm your co-host, Andrew.
And I'm your co-host, Michelle. Oh, shit.
You're a special guest, Jake. You're not our co-host yet. Don't introduce yourself.
Special guest. Oh, I don't get to introduce myself. Okay. I'm a man of
no,
mysteries.
you do, just not yet. Oh.
I'm waiting for my cue.
All right, and Raspberry.
Oh, and I am your special guest, Jake, also a member of the family.
And I'm your co-host, Mom, or Michelle.
You already introduced yourself.
Yeah, Andrew, now you get to go again.
And I'm your co-host, Andrew.
We spoke at the same time.
Oh.
Well,
that's okay. I'll split them all apart
okay.
in editing. This is why we have separate tracks for each of
us. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So we can put them all simultaneously to save airtime and get more content.
I can already tell.
Exactly.
This episode is going to be a bit of a shit show. In a fun way.
Yes.
Yeah,
certainly.
Of course.
Okay. Well, do you want to introduce the topic, one of you wonderful co-hosts?
Yeah, so today we are going to talk about a video that I found. I wasn't even looking for anything specifically. It just came up on my YouTube recommended. But it was about, let me see if I can find the title of it. Hang on.
Ooh.
I might have the title quicker than you.
I'm going to cut this out.
No, don't cut it out. Everybody has to know you didn't have the title ready.
Intellectual bypassing, what it is and how to start feeling again.
That's the thumbnail.
Yes.
But yes.
Oh, yeah, the thumbnail. Okay, so it actually says avoidant attachment. Signs you're intellectually bypassing your emotions and how to stop.
I think the avoidant attachment, getting that in there seems important.
That's fair.
It was talking about how people with avoidant attachment styles, people who typically like pull away from attaching to other people and like relationships and whatnot, or aren't necessarily the most emotionally available, will can have a tendency sometimes to like rationalize their emotions or get too caught up in the explanations of them and think that explanation is the same thing as like feeling them, and thus bypass, hence the name intellectually bypass actually feeling them, and instead think that like naming them and understanding where they come from is enough. Does that seem like a fair
I think that's a
summary? There was a lot more to it, which we'll get into, but
I think it's a good like high level overview of what it was about.
So I guess I'll turn it to you guys first. What did you think about the video?
Are we forgetting something? Do we have to set an intention before we start?
Oh, we do. I don't still got it. It's been too long.
Who wants to set the intention today?
The crickets seem like they could do it.
Okay. All right. Well, so I have an intention, and I feel like my intentions are always personal to me, but I also feel like they could potentially apply to many. But when I got your video, there was a small piece of me that was like, uh-oh, this is going to be an episode where the boys tell me how much trauma I've caused them and how much pain they have in their lives because of how I showed up and parented. So I think my intention is to remember that I don't need to take things personally, and I can have an open mind and be present and be an active listener. So my intention is to be an active listener and to just check myself about how personal I take things in this whole day, not just for this episode. How's that sound? Does that sound like a good intention for all, or do you want to set your own intentions? Ooh.
That makes sense. I was going to say mine is maybe a little bit different. Watching the video, most of it kind of went over my head because I don't have any like psychology experience or anything like that. Like it's not really been an interest of mine or something that I've put a lot of research into, or really any research into. So like she's talking about all these attachment styles and like shooting for a secure attachment style. And like, okay, those words kind of make sense, but I don't really know all of what they mean. So I am going to try to learn something from talking with you all today.
I love it. That's a great intention.
Yeah. Well, gosh, no, I need to come up with an intention since both of you did. I thought that this isn't just a sustainable practice. We can't have 2 or 3 intentions every week for eternity. That's not true. We could.
Well, I actually feel like everybody, including the listeners, can all be invited to create their own intentions. I mean, if ours resonate with them, that's great. But also create your own. Make it your intention.
I could say to be present. I like my mind is going to like be present in the conversation. My intention is to be present in the conversation, as opposed to getting too in my head about it. I think that's probably a fair intention. Yeah, that's what we'll go with.
I actually love that, and I love the irony of that. Or like because it's talking about being too intellectual. Like the video kind of talks about that, being intellectualizing versus feeling, and then you literally set an intention to not be all in your head, which is kind of in alignment with what the video is talking about, I think.
Yes. Yeah, that's part of the reason why.
Cool. So Jake's not super into, or Jake's not, I don't want to say super into, but like psychology hasn't been something that Jake has really dug into, he said.
Correct.
For me, I dug into psychology. I mean, my degree from college is child psychology, but that was, 30 some years ago? That was a really long time ago for me. So, and Andrew, you are currently studying psychology, yes?
Not formally, but I took several psychology classes in my undergrad, and now I'm studying education. So I've got there are some more psychology classes I'm taking now, but they're more like education related. But I do have I've taken Psych 101 and like some more classes, so I have some of that like background, like vocabulary, I suppose.
So I'm curious what you thought when you listened to the video, both of you.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest, like nothing in there like really immediately resonated very strongly with me. Like it wasn't, I mean, maybe it's just because I don't consume that kind of content very often, but it was kind of just like, okay, you know, she's talking about things that don't all make sense to me. And like, I feel like I'm starting on like a 2000 level course, and I should be starting on a 1000 level course or something like that. But, there were a couple of things that did stand out a little bit. One of them was, I think, the very first point she made about like people who, you know, at least have some of these characteristics will tend to rationalize other people's behavior and be like, okay, I can see where they're coming from, so I'm not like I can't really feel a lot of anger towards them, or really any anger towards them. If somebody like wounds you and you kind of know why and like you get it, it's hard to like really get mad at them, right? And that's maybe So that's something that like I feel like I have experienced and do still experience, which has its like ups and downs. Or like she presented it as like a very bad thing, not a very bad thing, but like something that should be worked on, right? And I think that makes a lot of sense. It's not something that I've really seen that way before, but like, you know, I suppose you kind of are denying yourself the emotions that you should be feeling, right? Which is kind of what the point that Heidi in the video was making. So it was the first thing that kind of stood out. I was like, okay, this kind of makes sense. Like, I understand what you're talking about here.
Yeah. How about you, Andrew? Did that piece jump out at you?
Yeah, I definitely feel that. Like my whole life, that has been sort of how I don't think I'm a very angry person. Like it's very difficult to make me angry. And I think like that might be part of like the root of that is like that's always been my go-to. Like if something is bothering me that someone else is doing, my go-to is like see it from their perspective, try and understand it, and that helps. That helps me process that feeling. And like it was really interesting to hear a perspective from Heidi that like according to her that's not processing that feeling, right? That's rationalizing that feeling.
Well, part of it is because like being angry sucks a lot, right? Like it's not fun.
Yeah. Exactly. Like I don't want to be
especially with someone that you like
over here
care about, right?
Yeah.
Oh, it's so interesting. Because, like, well, anger is my comfort emotion because I was angry for so long. You know? So for me, I'm like, oh, I'm angry. I'm comfortable here. How long am I going to live here? And not that I'm angry and I need to lash out or anything like that, but just that, like, I feel, and I guess now it's maybe less anger and more frustration when it does bubble up. But I find, like, when I was listening to her, and I feel like, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to remember back to the beginning of my journey when I started unpacking some traumas that I found that I didn't know had happened. But I find myself, like, for me, like, I get mad, and I can almost always find, like, why the thing happened, like, what the person, you know, was what was in their own way or to make them show up a certain way that didn't feel good for me. Mm-hmm. I can almost always, if not always, find a way to rationalize that. But I'm mad too, or I'm pissed too, or I'm sad too. And then I get mad at myself for being mad because they didn't know any better and they were doing the best they could. So I'm like having this guilt and shame on myself for being mad about something that I have every right to be mad about, but then telling myself I shouldn't be mad about it because they didn't have anything better in them. Like they did the best they could with what they knew at the time. And so it's like, I feel like when I was listening to that, I'm like, I feel like I do all those things and I'm not sure any of that is healthy. Like, it almost like it puts me into a catch-22. Like, I understand where they're coming from. It still doesn't make it right. And I am pissed about it and I'm going to allow myself to be pissed about it. But how do I heal from that? But then I find myself at some point along that process of healing, I'm mad at myself for being mad about it because I'm not giving them the grace that they deserve just as much as I deserve grace. You know what I mean? I don't know. It was like it was interesting for me to think about the way she presented that.
And there's a difference between like you said, feeling mad about something, feeling angry about something, and like lashing out, right?
Yeah.
That is like maybe where that distinction is. Like if somebody does something does the best that they can with the information they have available, right? Like you're saying, and you get mad because they hurt you. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Like that's good and healthy. If you like take it super far and like retaliate really hard at them, then maybe that's where like that feeling makes sense. But like it sounds like you're not doing that, but the feeling is there anyway, right?
Yeah, but I think the flip side of that, I think there's two sides of pain points for that cause a pain that can then potentially be trouble. Is like lashing out is one side of it, and the other side of it is stuffing it or not honoring it within yourself. Right. Like I have to do something to overcome that anger. I have to do something to heal that. I have to do something to forgive. Forgive who? Forgive what? Myself, them, all of the above. And I think forgive is a tricky word for people in general. But I think like for me, that was like I had to start with me, I guess, and focus on that.
Yeah, like I totally get that. Like feeling like you have to do something with your anger. Like to me, like how I handle that is like the time and place to deal with my anger is not when I'm still interacting with the person who made me angry.
100%. Yeah.
Like I will do that on my own time. Like I'm not keeping that here. That just makes things worse. I've seen that happen. I've seen like,
oh my gosh, a million times just in my family alone. I'm certain of that. But like that's it though. Over the course of the journey of my own transformation and now seeing others work through that as well, it's a healthy boundary. If you're setting a boundary in anger, it's not a healthy boundary. Like setting a healthy boundary is done in clarity and love, and there's you're not changing anyone, or you're not trying to change anyone. You're not adding strings to the boundary, but like that's a tricky, like there's healing that has to happen before you can set a healthy boundary, or at the very least clarity. I don't know. That's an interesting, having the experience with the person in the room when you haven't processed the emotion, whether it's anger, sadness, or anything else, complicates things, it feels like.
Yeah. Somewhat related to, Andrew, I'm curious if you've experienced this, but like because of the way that it sounds like, we kind of tend to rationalize what other people are doing and not always feel like angry about it, right? I know I have experienced like when I do something that is like the best that I could have done with the information I had, whether it was like an honest mistake or like I was missing a piece of information or like, whatever the case may be, and I hurt someone because of it and then they get mad at me, a lot of like something that I have definitely more so in the past, but still now, even when they get mad at me and they like express anger towards me, I'm like, what the heck? Like, what's this all about? Like, clearly I wasn't trying to hurt you, right?
Yeah. This is definitely something I've experienced too. I always think this is something I tie back to, like when this happens, either with me or with someone else. I think back to magic. You've talked on the show before how you've learned lessons from magic, and this is one that I've like learned, or at least not even necessarily a lesson, but like a perspective that I have from like you can even like just like games, or like this is really easy to imagine in like hypotheticals or games or probability, where like if you make the right choice, if you make a choice that has a 60% chance of a good outcome and a 40% chance of a bad outcome, and you chose that, and the bad outcome happens.
Assuming the goodness of the good outcome and the badness of the bad outcome are equal.
Yes. Barring, I would have specified if it was otherwise. Okay. You made the right choice, well, it depends on what your other options were, but if it was between that and one where the probabilities were switched, it was 40-60 instead of 60-40, you made the right choice, but a bad outcome still happened because of that, and it was because of the choice that you made. So,
right.
like
if you're playing poker and you have 80% to have the winning hand, and your opponent has like a 20% chance to have the card that beats you, and you bet and they call and you lose, you still lose your money.
Yeah, exactly. And the question there is, how do you assign fault? Like that seems to be the question that we're dealing with here, is like if I'm mad at you, do I is it fair for me to get mad at you for making that choice that lost me money or whatever? Like that, I'm mixing the metaphors now, but like, and like sort of the conclusion I sort of have come to is like, blame is kind of just a smokescreen. Like fault, like I don't really care about whose fault it was. I care more about like what the decision was, and like, I don't know. I like to me, the thought of needing it to be someone's fault for anger to be justified or whatever, or even necessarily thinking of anger as justified is like kind of beside the point. Like it doesn't really matter. Like if you're angry, if you're angry at me, you're angry at me, and I need to
yeah, that's something that I have every right to do, yeah, or whatever.
Right, yeah.
To feel, rather.
Yeah, and I think sort of what you, like, back to the question that you asked me is, like, I think, to me, I do struggle with that, because the result then is I'm telling myself I'm not at fault here, which is not necessarily, like, it's certainly not something I should say out loud to the person who's mad at me. And it's also not necessarily, like...
It also might not be true, right?
It also might not be true if I'm wrong about any of the steps here. And even if I'm right about all of the steps, maybe thinking of it as I'm at fault here will help me make better decisions in the future. So, like, that's the place where fault and blame, like, that's its usefulness is it is a tool that can help us make better decisions in the future. If I make a bad decision and then I think, and then I believe I'm at fault for the bad outcome that came, then that's gonna make me make better decisions in the future, theoretically. So, like, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think, like, maybe another way to put some of what we're talking about too is, like, if someone is sad about something, right? Like, even if it's not, like, maybe they're sad because of, it doesn't matter why, right? Like, that's kind of the point I'm making. Is somebody tells you they're sad, you would never be like, well, you don't have the right to be sad right now, right? But for some reason, my brain does tend to do that sometimes when they're angry at me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's, you know, a piece of why it is good to, going back to the video, right? Why it's good to let yourself experience the anger that maybe you should be feeling at something, so that you can understand when other people are experiencing anger towards you or people you care about as well. An example of how it can kind of help your relationships.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point that I hadn't necessarily thought about before. But, like, I know for me, I often, like when I like push down my own anger because I think, well, like they you know, they could have been thinking this or had this idea and they made the best decision they could. Sometimes I'm just wrong. Sometimes they were just being an asshole. Yeah. And, like, I shouldn't let that slide, and I did, and I do all the time, because
giving
I'm,
people
like,
too much of the benefit of the doubt.
I assume the best in people, and, like, that bit not me in the ass, but my friend Calvin in the ass in all of elementary school and middle school when he got bullied, and I would give the bullies the benefit of the doubt. And I wasn't listening to Calvin, and I wasn't listening to the bullies. I had my rose-colored glasses on, and I think my relationships would be better now, or, like, you know, my interpersonal skills would be better now if I was better at, like, expressing that when I have a problem with something. And something I'm working on, like, I'm trying to get, like with the people I care about now, like, I'm trying really hard to, like, when something bothers me, I will express that in some way. And sometimes it usually takes time. I usually still don't do it right in the moment that I'm bothered. I will take some time and breathe and, like, go by myself and then figure out how to say it. Right. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the problem I have, like, I tend to do that as well, is, like, take some time, but then sometimes by the time I have figured out what I want to say, I've calmed down. It's like, that wasn't really a big deal, because it doesn't feel like a big deal anymore.
Yeah.
So.
All right, that's a wrap for this one. We will catch you next week. And thank you for joining us. Please give us a like, a subscribe. You can find us on YouTube, on all of your podcast channels, except for Apple. We're not there yet, although we're working on it. And jaidewellness.com, JAIDEE wellness.com. We have Facebook, we have Instagram. we hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next week. Bye. Be you every day.
Bye.
Bye.